Consciousness is one of those topics in psychology that can be difficult to define. What I mean is that all of us know what consciousness is, but if I were to ask you to define it, you'd probably have some trouble. The purpose of this video is to give you a general overview of what consciousness is, into the various types of altered states of consciousness that we experience. As always, with these general overview videos, I will not be going into a lot of specific details about things like drug interactions, sleep, and sleep disorders. If you want to know more specific information about those topics, then definitely make sure you check out the videos I did on them, and you can find links for those videos below. Consciousness can be defined as our sense of awareness over external and internal stimuli. So for example, awareness of external stimuli can be things like response to light, sound, and many other sensory stimuli. Internal awareness deals more with perceptions of things like pain, emotions, and other types of psychological perceptions. One thing that's really interesting is that people tend to view consciousness as being an either-or prospect. Either you're conscious or you're not. However, this isn't true. Consciousness really exists on a spectrum. It can range from events that involve really high levels of conscious awareness, like when you're really actively studying or maybe competing in a sporting event, all the way to events that involve much less conscious awareness, like when we're sleeping. This range of consciousness can also explain lapses in memory or attention. After all, we've all had those moments where we may be doing something routine and boring and find our minds drifting off. It's also worth pointing out that when we're sleeping, we're not completely unconscious. During many stages of sleep, we actually do have some sensory awareness, and of course, everyone knows that dreaming can involve pretty impressive amounts of consciousness. Although there are many types of altered states of consciousness, the one that is the most universal is sleep. Sleep is also an example of what is known as a circadian rhythm. Circadian rhythms are body processes that roughly repeat on a 24-hour cycle. Oftentimes, I see that students think that the term circadian rhythm and sleep are synonymous. However, there are many other examples of circadian rhythms that don't necessarily involve sleep. For example, many hormonal levels alternate and repeat over a 24-hour cycle. So something like testosterone levels in men tends to be at its highest in the morning and then decline throughout the day. That's also a circadian rhythm, so don't be confused by thinking that sleep is the only circadian rhythm. Rather, it's just a really good example of a circadian rhythm. There are other types of rhythms that exist and have different terms based on when they occur. So a circadian rhythm happens on a 24-hour basis. Diurnal rhythms happen in a day-night basis. A good example of this would be like how plants need the sunlight in order to create energy in a process that we call photosynthesis. Infradian rhythms are ones that repeat every month, like a woman's menstrual cycle. We even have circa-annual rhythms that repeat roughly every year. Many people have a yearly mood cycle where they may have a more reduced mood in the winter months and more of an elevated mood in the summer months. Getting back to our discussion of sleep. Sleep is marked by a state of pronounced alterations of consciousness and wakefulness that is brought about by physiological changes in the body. What helps to regulate your sleep pattern is exposure to light. Historically, this was of course dictated by exposure to sunlight, since for much of human history that was our only source of light. However, exposure to artificial lighting, like from a lamp or a computer screen or cell phone, can also influence periods of wakefulness or even delay onset of sleep. The way this happens is that when light enters our eyes, it goes through our brains towards the occipital lobe in the back of our heads. Along the journey to the occipital lobe, these optic neural pathways go through the thalamus. The thalamus is basically like the meeting point of many of the sensory systems in our body. Exposure to light activates or deactivates a part of the thalamus called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or SCN. The SCN is located right next to the hypothalamus, which helps regulate our brain and body's physiological functioning. In many ways, you can think of the SCN as being like our own internal clock. Many studies have been done to show that animals, especially pets like dogs and cats, have a really precise internal sense of time. I know my dogs and cats definitely know what time they should be fed, all the way down to the second. Humans have become more dependent on external sources of time, like our cell phones, clocks, watches, so we're generally less in tune with this internal, natural sense of time. This is one of the reasons why many people, like those working night shifts, may have drastically altered sleep schedules too. The hypothalamus is located right next to the pituitary gland, which is considered the master gland of the endocrine system. The endocrine system regulates the release of hormones throughout the body. Sleep is brought about by the release of hormones from the pituitary gland and neurotransmitters from the hypothalamus that help to trigger the onset of sleep. Sleep is the most obvious example of how our consciousness can be altered, but it's not the only example. Plenty of different substances that we consume can also alter our awareness of internal and external stimuli. Typically, when people hear this, their minds immediately go to things like cocaine or really strong mind-altering substances like hallucinogens. However, you may be shocked to know that even relatively routine substances like caffeine, alcohol, and tobacco can have an impact on how our brains function. This is generally possible because of how these substances specifically interact with certain parts of the brain, and especially how they impact certain neurotransmitters. Because I talk a lot about how both sleep and substance use can alter our consciousness in other videos, I wanted to talk about two lesser known states of altered consciousness. Hypnosis and meditation are both great examples of ways in which our consciousness can be altered. Both are also used in modern psychology as a non-traditional treatment for certain conditions. Hypnosis has a long history, and some of that history certainly crosses the line into pop psychology. Generally speaking, during hypnosis, a person is made very comfortable and relaxed, then told to focus on one thing. Typically, this can be a sound or an object. As the person relaxes more and more, they begin to have lesser states of consciousness, at which time they can be more open to messaging given to them by the therapists. So let's give this a try. Let's start by getting comfortable. Start to relax, focus on your breathing, focus on the object that you are seeing, and pay close attention to it while you make yourself more and more comfortable. Just focus, relax. You feel yourself getting more and more comfortable. You're beginning to get tired. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. Did it work? Okay, so all joking aside, hypnosis doesn't always work on everyone, but it can be effective for some people. I've heard of it being useful in helping people deal with addictions in particular, especially things like overeating, smoking cessation, and even for helping people with pain management. It's more effective for people that tend to be more prone to suggestibility, and some people have argued that the benefit of hypnosis is more of an example of kind of like a placebo effect. However, it's also worth noting that some studies have shown that there does tend to be changes in some people's brain functioning as a result of experiencing hypnosis. Meditation is something that's gained a lot of popularity recently and has been incorporated in many psychological treatments. It's similar to hypnosis in that a person is usually directed to focus on one thing. Oftentimes, it can be something as simple as your own breathing. Typically, meditation doesn't involve high states of relaxation like with hypnosis, but rather heightened awareness. In fact, being overly relaxed and sleepy is usually discouraged in meditation. There are many different types of meditation that exist, and this video is definitely not long enough to go into how to actually practice meditation. One thing I do like to point out though is that many studies have been done that show that people who meditate frequently do have marked changes in their attention span, memory, decreased stress levels, and even better management of things like anxiety and depression. For this reason, meditation has been incorporated in many psychological treatments. I do have to admit though that I'm a little biased here because I am a huge fan of meditation. I usually try to meditate at least twice a day and have noticed a huge change in my attention, my focus, my memory, and even a decrease in my overall stress. If you've never meditated, I really encourage for you to at least give it a try. Just keep in mind that meditation is kind of a little bit like exercise. You won't see the benefits until you stick with it for a while. After all, you can't go to the gym one time and leave with a six-pack of abs. In fact, it's usually the opposite. If you haven't been to the gym in a while, you may leave feeling a little sore and kind of hurting a little bit. When you first start meditating, it may be difficult to focus and your mind may wander. This is perfectly normal, but with more practice, you'll start to see the benefits. On a side note, some studies have shown that college students that meditate regularly actually have better grades than students that don't. This probably has something to do with increasing attention, memory, and focus. So definitely try it out and see if it works for you. Thanks for watching, everybody.